Hi, it's Joe here from Joe's Country Junction. I am doing a reader request video today. I had a blog reader talk to me and she asked me if I would go into more of an in-depth description about leaders and enders and what I meant by that. Well, I was not aware of leaders and enders for a long time, but I am a collector and buyer of antique sewing things, and so I've been at auctions and oftentimes I've bought an old sewing basket and I saw a little piece of fabric in the box that looked like this, and lots of times they've had strings all over them and everything else, but this was just a piece that a woman, while she was sewing, she always wanted something to be under her needle, so she would just take, right here I have a star block that I'm making, and she would just take and she would run this through her machine like this so that she could clip off her next piece without having to worry about the threads that come from the machine. Oftentimes, if you're sewing, if you cut the thread in between the pieces that you're sewing, you have to deal with the tails of thread. You have to clip them off the piece that you just sewed. You have to make sure when you start sewing again that you hold the ends of the thread so that they don't go down into the feed dogs, or if they don't completely unthread and you have to go back to rethreading your needle again. So a lot of people use one of these things. There's a dozen different names for what some people call them. And so that's how I started thinking about having something under my needle all of the time. And then later on, I discovered Bonnie Hunter, and she has a wonderful page on her blog, quiltville.com. And there she tells more about leaders and enders, and that's how I originally found out about them. So rather than just putting that little piece of fabric under your needle and sewing on that all of the time, her philosophy was, why not put something useful under the needle? And so that way you can get more sewing done rather than just always sewing on this little piece of fabric that's in here and then having nothing to show for it in the end. Well, I thought about that, and that was a great idea. And through the process and through time, I've gotten so I always have something under my needle. And I think the term that she uses is leaders and enders. And so this is leading your new piece of sewing. And then as you sew that through, so let's say I'm just working on my star block here, and I'm just adding this piece to the side, and I'm feeding it through. Then I can clip this off the back and I don't have to deal with any threads. And let's say I was done with my block, then I could just feed this through again, and then I could clip this off, and then I am working on my piece and not having to deal with all of those pieces. So it led the piece as it went through, and it ended the piece as it went through. Most people just do a whole bunch of chain sewing, and then at the end of their chain sewing, when they want to stop their chain, then that's when they would put a leader and ender piece through. Right now, I've told you before, my leader and ender project is my broken dishes blocks, and those are the pieces that these are the blocks I'm making out of the leftovers from my star blocks. And so these are just broken dishes blocks. They're just small and easy, and someday I'm going to make a quilt out of them. I have a design in mind, but I haven't got to start putting it together yet. And right now, as I'm sitting here, I have a whole stack of triangles that need to be sewn together into those broken dishes. I also have another project. Blog readers often send me things, and it's like projects that they don't want to finish, and lots of times I sew them up and then I offer them as a donation quilt for a charity or a benefit. And so right now, quite some time ago, somebody sent me this, and it's just simple. It's simple charm squares, and right now it's this big, but there is a whole stack more of fabric that is waiting to be sewn into it. I have this whole stack of fabric that will be sewn and added to that to make it bigger, and that's going to be my next leader and ender project. I already have that pulled out. In the past, I've made a lot of different quilts as a leader and ender project. If you're new to leaders and enders, I would suggest trying something very simple like a charm quilt. And so I have a couple examples of ones I've made using the leader and ender method. And so this is just a charm quilt. These again were pieces that a blog reader sent to me, and I just sewed them together, and this has been a quilt in my blanket box down in the living room, and when the grandkids come, they just use this as a little TV blanket. And my backing for that is just a piece of fabric that I got at the thrift store. And so it's just a simple little quilt, nice and easy. I had another blog reader send me pieces, and I made this one. This again was started out with from a blog reader, and she had sent me a whole bunch of pre-cut squares of this fabric. And to get this big enough, I dug through my fabric to see if I could get more pieces that would coordinate with that, and I was able to. And so this is just alternating block, and then around the outside all of the blocks are neutrals. So that was a very simple quilt. So both of these would work great for leader and ender. I've also made a big quilt out of shirts, only that was a full-size one that was for my son when he moved into a house. It was a housewarming present. I've also made one out of batiks, and that one was so cool with just squares of batik prints that I gave that as a donation quilt for a benefit. Another type of quilt that would work great if you're new to leaders and enders is a coin quilt. And so this is a coin quilt that I've made in the past. It's sitting in my stash. That nothing's hard about this. These are just 2.5 by 4.5 inch strips sewn together in rows, and then a divider between the rows of a 2.5 inch strip. No pattern even needed. Just sit down and sew the strips together as long as you want and make them all the same length, and then you can make a quilt like this easy enough. And this is a great leader and ender project. Okay. So there's 3 of them. I'll give you another idea for a leader and ender project. This is a free pattern on my blog, and this is called Brick House. And this is a fairly easy because it's just sewing units together to make this rectangle shaped block. And this is like just a baby quilt I have at my house that's ready when the next person who has a baby has a boy. So this is a very easy pattern. I'll put a link in the description below, and this is called my Brick House pattern. This would make a great leader and ender quilt. I've made this in girl colors, 2 different ones in girl colors. I've made this as a full-size quilt as well. It's an easy pattern that works great as a leader and ender. In general, any pattern that has 1, 2, or 4 pieces to it works good as a leader and ender. If your block has more pieces than 4, it's kind of hard to use it as a leader and ender and to keep your main project coordinated and organized, and then your side project coordinated and organized. Because somebody asked about that. They asked, how do you keep it all organized when you're sewing 2 projects at once? Well, my main project I keep on this side of my machine, and over here, or over here, is where I keep the small pieces for my secondary project. That's my leader and ender project. And so all of the pieces for this, they're all on this side. So if I want to grab 2 pieces to put in as an ender, I just swivel my chair a little this way, grab those 2 pieces and put them through. And then I'll clip those off and I'll set them back over to this side to keep the 2 projects separate. And it works really well for me. I have a little table that juts out the side here, so I'm kind of working in a U shape because I have another table over here. And if you keep yourself in a U shape or even an L shape, that works really well if you're trying to sew 2 projects at once. Okay, so here's another idea. I made one of these a long time ago as a leader and ender project, and it is a tumbler block. And these were leftovers from that. I'll be making another tumbler block quilt. I did these in Iowa State, or in Iowa colors, sorry, not Iowa State, in Iowa colors. And then I donated this to a benefit. And so this, I had made too many, and these were left over, so I will make another quilt like this again, being I already have this much sewn together. So that's some ideas for you to use and make projects to make as leader and enders. As I said, I would just use a project that's only has one, like a charm square, or two, like, you know, if you're sewing two pieces together to make like that coin quilt, or otherwise 4 pieces like that brick house quilt. If you get more than that into your block, it's kind of hard. I'm able to use these broken dishes blocks as a leader and ender because they are already sewn together in half square triangles. So I'm just sewing the half square triangles together, and then that makes an okay block to sew together. If you get any more pieces than that, it's just kind of hard to keep it organized. So when do I sew a leader and ender piece? Right now, I'm in the process of making 4 star blocks. When I get all the pieces through for 4 blocks, then I'll put in the leader and ender piece. Sometimes if I have a stack like this and I want to get the stack going, I might throw 3 or 4 in at a time. I don't always just put 1 in at a time. Sometimes it's more. Sometimes if I usually go to bed around 10:30. And if it's like 10:15 and my TV show got done a little bit sooner than I thought that I was watching while I was cross-stitching, and I come upstairs, my sewing room's right at the end of the hallway, my bedroom's on the opposite end of this hallway, and the bathroom's right next to the sewing room here. I might peek in my sewing room and, I'll see that leader and ender project there, and I'll think, I could just sew 10 pieces through. And so I'll come in here, flip the sewing machine on, flip the light on, and I will sew just 10 pieces through. I do that quite often, just sneak in a little time, and I'll sew a few more leader and enders than I actually need to, just because I like to see that project progress too. I've made big quilts that have been leader and ender projects. If I have like 4 patches that need to be sewn together, I'll sew those as a leader and ender project. I don't know, I've really enjoyed that, and most of all, I love getting a quilt finished that I didn't really sit down and sew, because like this quilt, I'm never going to probably sit down and sew that until I sew all the strips together. And that makes it, all of a sudden the quilt comes together and it's kind of magic. I love that feeling. But more than all of that, I love the frustration of my needle not coming unthreaded. I love the frustration of the strings not going down underneath into the feed dogs and making a mess and a knot under there that I have to clean out. There are just so many good things that come from using the leader and ender method, I guess is the word I want to say. So that's why I stick with it, and that's why I do it, and that's why I will always use leaders and enders when I'm sewing. And so I hope, blog reader, that answers the question for you, and I hope maybe you too will come to enjoy leader and ender projects just like I do, because they are really fun. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for stopping by my sewing room. Thanks so much. Bye.